Hello, everyone out in stay-home land. Welcome to the Hockey Podcast for Sunday, April 26th. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey. You can follow me on Twitter at KVULE. You can also like us on Facebook, the Hockey Podcast as well. And there is a lot going on. And with this week has been a very interesting week for hockey. We will get into some of the other NHL issues first, or a little bit later on in the podcast. Sean is here with me right now. Hello, Sean.
Hello.
Hello. You sound great. You still sounded great even before the pre-record, and now even in the record, you even sound more booming and better. Like you sound crisp. And Chris and Heidi and Tyler and Devin will be joining us a little bit later. But one of the things that happened this week, and it's been a goal of ours on our podcast, to try to get a little bit more other than NHL content to talk about. And one of the places that we've wanted to focus on is the WHL. And the WHL had their Bantam Draft this week. Was a unique week for them in terms of Connor Bedard being the first ever exceptionally, we'll get that explained from our guest today, but exactly how that works, because I just stumbled over my words, but we're going to start talking about the WHL. The Zach Moffat is with us. He is in Kamloops, and he followed the WHL draft with DN Scouting. Zach, how's it going?
Great. How are you guys doing?
I am great here in the staying inside in fine Burnaby, British Columbia. And Sean is doing great too.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. We're socially distancing here in Calgary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Zach, I guess before we start, obviously with everything going on now, of course we have the unique situation with Connor Bedard, but the situation here, most leagues were not able to completely complete their season. I know some playoffs had to be canceled, things like that. How much of a challenge was the draft this year in compared to other years? I mean, the WHL does basically a virtual type of draft anyway. Was it that much different, or was it kind of the same? How did that look from your perspective?
From my perspective, it was more or less the same. You kind of follow along on the website. This year they did a live show, which was new, just given the circumstances. For teams, it was quite different because normally they congregate in a building in a WHL city. Last year was Red Deer, and the teams have tables and they can talk to one another to make deals and things like that, and they make their selections on the floor there. So from that regard, it was different this year for teams as they were all at home. Scouts were at home on conference call. GMs, directors of scouting might have been in the same room, but 6 to 10 feet apart kind of thing. So you saw less trades this year, which was one of those unique aspects, I think, to our current situation.
Okay. All right. So tell us about Connor Bedard. Tell us about the uniqueness of him from your perspective. The OHL has had more of these. This has happened a little bit more, but tell us a little bit about what we're seeing from Connor Bedard. What is exciting everybody about him, and why was he given exceptionally talent exempt status?
Oh, where do you start with Bedard? He's pretty well elite in every offensive aspect of the game. Whether you look at skating, puck skills, playmaking ability, his best attribute is probably his shot. He's just the kind of guy that can score from anywhere in the offensive zone, really, below the red line, top of the circle, blue line. He's just pinpoint accurate, very quick release. He's deceptive in the different angles that he can use his release at as well, which makes it almost impossible to defend him.
Sean, did you have any questions?
Yeah. Connor is the first WHL player to reach exceptional status. And I know there's been some discussion about it because we went through having players like Connor McDavid, John Tavares, and then we also had the Sean Day issue. where do you sort of slide him in if you compare him, if you even can compare him to the other players who have gotten that exceptional status?
It's a little bit harder to compare them, just being that all of our other examples are out east, and we don't get to see those guys as much when they're 15, 14 years old. The Sean Day, I know people sort of look to him as maybe a bust, but there were a lot of external circumstances that really impacted his hockey career, which not a lot of people are aware of. I can't really go into too much detail, but I believe there's some loss in the family and some other things that happened that sort of derailed that aspect. Connor is as good as a prospect as I've seen in Western Canada in probably my lifetime.
Okay. So Regina is getting a player that they're going to be very excited about, and hopefully that turns around the Regina Pats franchise, which, like Kamloops, is a pretty historic franchise in the WHL.
Yeah, a lot of history in Regina.
So the top three that the Chorus going, just as I pull this up here, all the way up to the top here. Tell us about the number 2 and the number 3 picks, because there was also a little bit of buzz about them as well.
Yeah. So rumored leaks, I don't know for sure, but it's my understanding both of them also applied for exceptional status this year. So that would have made 3 players this year that had applied for that. So the number 2 selection was Riley Heidt. He was sort of a consensus 3 or a 2B in this draft, as his teammate this year, Braden Yeager, is a centerman with just a bigger centerman, and teams kind of covet that position a little more than the winger. PG went with a pretty safe pick. A lot of people feel he might have higher upside offensively than Braden Yeager does. He's just a really fast, skilled winger. He's going to bring a lot of offense to PG's lineup in the future years. Going to complement their recent selections of Cone Zimmer really well. So he projects as a really safe, high-end forward for that team.
Sean, did you have anything on that, or?
No, I was looking at that, and looking at Braden Yeager and his size and everything. I think there's definitely something. I think Moose Jaw definitely did get someone that you probably are looking at. I do like that they're both interesting. They're both from the Saskatoon Contacts organization, which is an absolute factory for creating WHL players and even NHL players, because I can't even, I think it was there's a lot of players that came through that organization. I've seen a few teams play in the Max Midget tournament here in Calgary.
Yeah, the both Riley and Braden stepped up this year to the Contacts to play Midget AAA. Both those second-year Bantams, and that's an exceptionally difficult league to play in just for midgets. So it was quite exceptional that they both stepped into that league and performed at almost a point per game pace.
Cool. And is there anyone? What were some of the other picks that you kind of thought were interesting picks? Did someone go higher than was expected, and did someone go lower than was expected?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing about this draft is just how deep it is. So after the first 5 picks, it was pretty unanimous consensus-wise what the top 5 players were in this draft. It was the 3 that applied for exceptional status and 2 defensemen from the Canadian Sports School League, Lucas Dragisevich and Tanner Milondike. So after that, it was kind of anyone's guess as to where teams would go, as there was still a ton of high-end skill and a lot of really good big defensive prospects in the draft. So at 6, a little bit of a surprise was seeing Red Deer just go for Kaylin Lind. They full-blown skill, great scorer, which was a little bit of a surprise, being as there's some big mobile defensemen on the board that were Alberta boys. And then Sam Maremba at 7, Seattle prioritizing again skill. Another high-end elite playmaker, just a fantastic player. But the biggest surprise early would have been Andrew Crystal at 8. he's elite in every sense from an offensive point of view. But we have seen people rank him as low as, maybe late mid-20s. And Kelowna went there just because of his skill set. He's a very undersized forward. And he definitely needs to develop his strength and skating a bit. So I thought it was a little surprise, though validating from the point of view that the WHL is now prioritizing more skill than anything rather than size, which I thought was good. In terms of guys that I thought probably went late, Caden Hamill at 19, falling to Kamloops there. I don't think I saw any draft rankings that had him outside of the top 10 skaters in the draft this year. So I thought that was very surprising. And his teammate, Graydon Slippick, a slick playmaking forward with great vision, fell to 27. And I'd seen him in a lot of top 10s as well. And Kamloops actually nabbed him as well. So those were two of the more surprising guys to see fall, in my mind. Maybe in the first round, in terms of a bit of a reach, might have been Cole Miller to Lethbridge at 16. I think at the start of the season, no one would have been surprised to see him get selected there. But his output this year was less than his first year in Bantam, playing on the same team. And so I thought they might have reached a little bit to get their guy when he might have been available a bit later with so much talent on the board.
With Cole Miller, he's listed as 6'2". Did he have a big growth spurt in the past year, do you think?
I think he had a little growth spurt. Yeah, he definitely wasn't 6'2" in his first year. But I'm not sure if I would attribute his performance necessarily to that. He was fantastic in his first year Bantam with the Edmonton Casey Squire Knights of Columbus. He was probably their best player in that first year. And then so you look for him to make that jump, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't quite there. But he's a fantastic two-way centerman as well.
Yeah, my brother Devin, who unfortunately couldn't make it to this part of the interview, he played with the Bantam AAA Airdrie team like a year or two after they had their big run with Dana Terrell, Zach Boychuk, and others. So he went through all that, and I just remember seeing some of these kids at that age just being so gangly, and when especially when they get to that size so early.
Yeah.
So that's when I see them that big, and I wonder how comfortable they are in their body, and if they know how to use it properly at that point.
Yeah, a lot of 14-year-olds that hit 6 foot plus aren't that comfortable. That's definitely something to take into consideration. You see, there's a couple defensemen in this draft, especially that are like 6'2", 6'3", and over 200 pounds. And so you look at them, and it's hard to project because they are growing into this body, and they're much bigger. So they've clearly gone through a big growth spurt. And you see some of these guys, and they're that size, and they can still move around. You can kind of get a feel for what kind of potential they have, but it's definitely an obstacle, one of the many obstacles that teenagers deal with.
I imagine it is there is obviously an adjustment from going to Bantam to the major juniors. And what are some of the challenges that you have seen or heard in terms of that we talked a little bit about the size part, but what else is a bit of a challenge?
Well, strength is such a huge speed and strength, experience. I mean, when you're a 16-year-old breaking into the WHL, you could be unbelievably talented like a Dylan Genther. And, that first half of the season, it's a real adjustment because you're playing against much older, much stronger, much better competition day in, day out. Whereas when you're a top-tier player in Bantam or even midget, the talent level is just, it's a couple steps below. And it's not to say that they're bad hockey players, but when you step up and you're playing against almost adults every night, it's very difficult.
Yeah. We've got from Calgary here, and I'm looking at the Hitmen, and they picked Oliver Tulk, who's from Gibson's, that played for Delta. Smaller guy. What did the Hitmen have there?
I thought that was a great pick for the Hitmen at 12. That's probably right in his sweet spot in terms of a lot of draft rankings as well. So Tulk is just a fantastic two-way forward. He has great vision, good finish, plays tenacious tenacious game at times on the forecheck, but his IQ is just off the charts. He understands the game. When he has the puck on his stick, he can control the play. I think he's just one of the best two-way centermen that were in the draft this year. I think once he sort of grows a little bit, he's just 5'6", 5'7", grows a little bit, I think he's going to be a fantastic WHLer.
For the Giants, their first pick at 32 was Ty Haliburton. How did you feel about that?
So Haliburton was a good pick at 32, but the Giants also got Masden Leslie at 10.
Oh, sorry about that.
I thought that was huge. I hadn't seen Masden Leslie ranked outside of anyone's top 8 or 7 all year. He had stepped up as well to midget AAA this season, which was it's a hard thing to do for a defenseman, especially a defenseman that plays his style. So I think what had happened, and it's just sort of a circumstances with the season shutting down and stuff, is people didn't get to watch him play against his peers at the end of the year in the Alberta Cup, and so I think that really actually hampered his draft status, as well as his offensive output at midget this season might not have been as prolific as some of the scouts would have wanted from a big offensive defenseman like him. But they landed just a gem, a great skating, big defenseman, likes to play physical, but has great offensive upside as well. I don't think they ever foresaw him falling to them at 10, and they're probably one of the teams that benefited from all the seasons being shut down early, landing a guy like that.
Mentioned, I'm assuming he was part of that, the big mobile defenseman that you were talking about earlier, from Alberta. Who else was with it? Were you thinking about when you mentioned that?
Oh man, there's a bunch this year. Masden Leslie was probably the third best defenseman in the draft after the first 2 taken there at 4 and 5. Another guy I liked was Austin Zemlak. Not quite as big, but 5'11" for a 14-year-old is quite big. He's just an elite athlete. You can tell he's a little raw, but he just gets it, and he's going to be a fantastic player. There's a couple other guys there that I really liked. Caden Hamill that fell to 19 with Kamloops. That another big, fast defenseman. I heard the Kamloops guys compare him a bit to Shea Theodore. And then you got other guys in the draft. Matteo Fabrizi fell a little bit. He's more of a big physical guy, but he was 6'3", 220. Terrell Goldsmith went 15 to Prince Albert. He's also 6'3", around 200 pounds, just playing behind Dragicevic. So he didn't get as much of the offensive opportunities as you might want to have seen, but his mobility for a 6'3" defenseman and just all around game is also very good.
Goaltenders, the first one was taken in the second round. Was that a surprise to you, or is it just...
No.
Is it a tough position to evaluate?
I think so. I think you have to have a really talented goalie coach and scout to sort of identify the potential in these guys. But the second round is kind of where you see a lot of the first goalies being taken. Last year, the second round, the first goalie taken was Dylan Ernst out of Kamloops, or not out of Kamloops, but drafted by Kamloops. So in terms of where they were selected, it wasn't too shocking to see a goalie go at the end of the second. I think that's the fact that it almost bled into the third there is just a testament to how good this skater group is this year.
Sean, did you have a question?
No, I think no.
Okay. Just the one final one I had before we kind of talk about what you're up to is the yearling Kamloops. You talked just a little bit, we were talking a little bit off air about how the Kamloops Blazers are rebuilding. It sounds like you're happy with the draft. And, as a former brief Kamloops resident and knowing the history of the Kamloops Blazers, it must be a little bit exciting to see them rising from the ashes sort of for you.
Yeah, growing up as a fan of the season ticket holder Blazers, definitely some good seasons, but some definite rough ones as well there for a while. And I think they didn't have the draft success for quite a few years that other teams might have had, especially in the BC division. But their last few drafts, they've just been knocking them out of the park. Not so much a fan now as I'm there scouting. So trying to keep the bias to the side, but Man, their regime and the prior regime, too, they had 3 16-year-olds play this year. Logan Stankoven scored 29 goals as a 16-year-old to tie the franchise record by goals for a 16-year-old, which was outstanding. And then I thought the current regime with Matt Bardsley, they're drafted exceptionally well last year. And this year they just had absolute gems fall to them in their picks. And I think they hit their draft out of the park this year.
Good. Well, yeah, that's going to be exciting. And I remember Logan Stankoven and sort of when he was arriving in Kamloops, I was there, and there was a lot of excitement about him. So good to hear that he is doing well. So kind of as we are kind of in this pandemic, how are you continuing on now that the draft's over? What are you guys up to in terms of WHL? Are you done until whenever we're back, or?
No, well, so first I'm an amateur hockey scout with ISS. So now my attention focuses and shifts to the NHL draft and getting reports done and rankings done on some of those guys that played in Western Canada and North America. So that's where my attention sort of shifts to. But we launched the Dub Network scouting just this week, just a day or two before the draft. And we're slowly getting our scouts to put reports up of players selected, in the top 100 this year, just to give fans some more insight onto these players and what kind of guys their organizations picked. So that's what we're up to right now. And even with COVID and no hockey going, there's lots of tape to watch. So that's also keeping me fairly busy, which is nice. But I certainly miss playoff hockey.
Oh, yes. You will not get any complaints over here from me. I agree with you there. I'm sure Sean agrees too. I don't.
Oh yeah.
I don't speak for Sean, but yeah. And so, how do we follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MoffatZach, or you can follow DN Scouting. Accounts up at DN Scouting. That's Dub Network Scouting Twitter handle. That's how you guys can reach me.
Okay. Well, Zach, I really thank you very much for taking a few minutes out of your day and kind of giving us a little bit of an insight about the WHL draft. And hopefully we will be in contact with you soon.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Zach.
Well, thank you to Zach Moffat for coming on and joining us to talk at WHL with Sean and I, as certainly going to be a very interesting draft and see what happens there. So we'll keep an eye out and contact Zach more for more WHL content, because I know Sean and I are definitely, we kind of, that's been a goal to get more into WHL and talk about other hockey, because, if you love hockey, you love hockey. But now we have, others have joined us. Heidi is representing the Heritage Classic Flames jersey proudly. And so she's like, yay. How's it going, Heidi?
Good. I got a new hat, too.
A new hat as well? Oh, it is because we're only on audio today, it is the Heritage Classic Calgary hat. Devin has his classic CGY hat on, and I don't know, Devin, if this is considered animal cruelty or animal brilliance, but your cat is drinking is drinking beer. That's how I will work it.
He loves my cat Carl. He loves chasing around the bottle cap. So anytime that he hears a beer open, he comes running.
Oh. That cat. Tyler is in Terrace. He has nothing different really going on there. I don't know.
No, same old story in the Sleepy Hollow. No hat this week either.
Nope. Okay.
Although I have to ask Devin. I mean, so does the cat get a little bit of residue off the cap there, and get a little?
I'm sure that's why he likes it too. Yeah, he's a little upset right now because if I let him have it right now, all you'd hear would just be a clinking bottle cap on the floor. So he's a little upset with me, but I'm sure the little residue will keep him going for the next hour and a half or so.
There we go. And Chris is with us as well. I think Bowie is trying to get into the conversation as well, but Bowie the cat is. And hello, Chris.
Hey there. And I actually had locked Bo in the bedroom with the fiance while we were recording.
Wait, you didn't lock your fiance in the bedroom. Wait. What? Oh, now, and I'm echoing. Wait. There we go. Just to be clear, they're not in prison. That's what. Never mind. Anyway. Oh my gosh. Couple things we'll get into here. It is the 5-year anniversary of Game 6 between the Flames and the Canucks from 2015. We'll get into that, and we'll be redrafting the Austin Matthews 2016 draft, which I think will be a very interesting. I predict that we're not going to have the same. We'll be somewhat different, but similar. But first, the NHL and the NHLPA have been in meetings. Gary Bettman was on this week with Ron McLean with his In Conversation, and they have been talking about, and the NHL is in conversation to discuss the idea of having a return. So the idea that is being presented, and I want to be careful of how we say this because as John Shannon has tweeted and as Pierre LeBrun has tweeted, this is not a guarantee. This is an idea going forward. There's no guarantee, but this is the idea that they have presented, is that Gary Bettman did tell Ron McLean that the idea of hub cities would be basically would be 4 divisional hub cities depending on the division. They would have to be NHL quality rinks. So it cannot be North Dakota's or Saskatchewan's or some of the neutral sites that were portrayed or proposed are kind of out at this particular point. So each division would have a hub city, and then they would be playing. There would be a training camp that would begin in June. The players are expected, according to some tweets, expected to be back by May 15th. The idea is a training camp would be in June, and hockey would return in some way in July. For the Pacific Division, the city that has come up as proposal has been Edmonton, Alberta. Dr. Dina Hinshaw was asked about this on Friday during her regular briefing, and this is what she had to say.
Professional sports will be played in Alberta before September 1st, and could exemptions be made if teams were willing to play in empty stadiums without fans and maybe with limited staff?
So I understand this is under discussion. I think this question came up a couple of days ago, and certainly as we look at our relaunch planning and the kinds of restrictions that we may be able to ease up on in the coming months, we would look at suggestions like this to determine if they fit within that relaunch plan. So at this time, it's a little early to say whether or not that will happen. But again, I think the important piece would be to assess what the risks might be and whether or not that can fit within the relaunch framework and what kinds of activities are allowed as we consider how and when we might slowly open up.
She was also asked and talked a little bit about how the spread of this is going, and this is what she also had to say, and I do think that playing some of this, I think, is an important context of this conversation.
Well, not a tale of futility, and we have control over this. By our actions, we have done incredible things and the main physical distance.
Hang on. Okay.
Distancing, regular hand washing. If they can't maintain physical distancing, consider the use of a mask, a non-medical mask. And the more we limit these gatherings, the more we limit the chance that the virus can jump from one person to 39 others in a single event. So again, I think really the numbers rising should be a cautionary tale, not a tale of futility. And we have control over this. By our actions, we have done incredible things, and the numbers to date have shown that we have the power to maintain this control of the spread together. And I know that people are tired, and I know that they want to get out, and they absolutely can. But we need to remember the physical distancing, hand washing, and to avoid these kinds of social gatherings where the virus can spread very easily.
Yeah, and I bring that up, and I also remind everyone that a couple of weeks before we all closed down, there was the Bonspiel in Edmonton, which became a big spread too. And she has talked about Dr. Hinshaw and even Dr. Henry has talked a little bit about how fast this is spreading. I'm not trying to get political here, but we do need to, when we go into this conversation, this has to be part of the conversation in terms of what we're doing with this spread. So I want to start with, anyone will jump in, I'm sure, but what are you seeing as a possible benefit for this? And then we'll get into some concerns, or maybe just go and react or how you're seeing this.
Well, the benefit is that it gives an outlet to people who are needing it, like an escape. We talked about this last week about what sports really, watching sports and following sports is. It's an escape, and we don't really have that, and people are struggling with that. We don't have things to look forward to at the end of the workday, especially if you're working from home, where there's no separation of home and work right now. So that's a huge benefit for getting that.
Okay. Chris, Heidi, Devin, Tyler, what other benefits are you seeing?
I'll let Chris go here first.
I actually didn't have anything on the top of my mind, so if you want to go first, Tyler, by all means.
Stop being so Canadian. Someone by the horse.
We were leaving Chris at the end all the time last week. So
I know. Chris always ends up, I feel bad for Chris because Chris says, I really have nothing to add because everyone has said everything that I wanted to say.
Here's your chance, Chris.
I give Tyler full props for offering that to me, but I didn't honestly have anything prepared. So if he wants to go first, or if Devin wants to go first, by all means.
No, the benefit is, it's definitely getting to be a grind for people right now with the whole situation and being so cooped up and not being able to do things. So just to be able to get some kind of live sports back on the television, to break up the monotony, I think is big, and will get everybody feeling a little more positive. And I hope that positivity would generate a little stronger commitment to seeing this cause through, because I think right now people are starting to slack on the whole social distancing thing. I mean, I'm in a smaller community in northern BC, and there's not a lot of social distancing going on that I can see on a weekend. We got the golf course open again now. Like, people are feeling pretty comfortable, and I think complacency is a concern right now. But you put some live sports on the TV, that'll certainly be one thing that would keep people at home, I think, and entertained at the same time.
Yeah, I don't see a negative point to it at all. All I see is positivity coming from putting live sports back on the TV. It gives people like us something to talk about. It gives a little bit of stress relief, distraction, and overall it's just since there won't be any spectators, the chances of it spreading because of it there's no chance of it, other than the potential of spread between players and teams and stuff like that. So it's I'm all for it.
And as fair or as unfair as it is, typically, like, players of that caliber get tested quite easily and have access to those tests pretty easily. So they should be able to keep, any sort of outbreak under control if any player should get it. But yeah, obviously there is a positive aspect in the sense that not only for the NHL's finances is concerned, but as far as like the mental health of the fans as well. Just being able to watch sports again would be a huge lift for a lot of people.
Yeah, and for me, like, I'm just gonna sound like a broken record saying this over and over again. Like, as long as they do it right, and as long as they're foreseeing any kind of issue that if just in case somebody on the team just gets diagnosed, what would happen, and kind of contingency plans for that kind of stuff. So as long as I would love to see the answers to those questions before they announce or when they announce. Mm-hmm. Any of this, because that might just be me and my just the way that I think in general, but I want to know all the answers to those questions, because there's so many things that could could go, not like, I don't want to use the word wrong, but that could come up.
Yeah, I'm fully with you, Heidi.
Yeah. After we Kevin and I talked with Zach Moffat off air, we talked a little bit more about this, and there was a few sort of things that came up that I think haven't been discussed. Like, are we talking hub cities where they go in and that's all they do is they go to and from the hotel to the rink and they're playing, and they're just playing within their division? Or are we having these teams and players traveling from hub city to hub city to play road games and quote unquote road games and all that? Because that adds some risk to it. What about security? Because you know that when this all happens, there's going to be people out there who are going to try and get autographs and try and meet these players. So, and that's something that I didn't even think of before Zach brought it up when we were talking with him off air. Like, there's a lot of different
that came up
the little details that need to be taken care of to make this done right. If it's done right, I have a hard time seeing a negative. But the negative comes from missing a detail or not doing it correctly. And then you end up creating another outbreak of people and all that. So I think that's just where I'm at.
Well,
sorry, say that again, Chris?
I was saying, like, there's a whole whack of those variables that could go wrong as well. So, like, as far as trying to mitigate that, it's definitely going to be a challenge.
Well, and yeah, I also had that concern with Zach too about the player part, and I'm also, but I do want to kind of let's make sure that we do get this across. That the idea is that there will be weekly testing. The idea is that it would be following what Dr. Fauci, who, by the way, I want to quickly remind. Never mind, I'll leave that for later. But Dr. Fauci said that you isolate everybody, you do weekly testing. And no fans. That's basically what their idea was. There is a player committee. Mark Scheifele is part of that player committee, according to Larry Brooks. It's called the Return to Play Committee. So there are players that. Here, I'm sort of one of the other things that I'm just curious for the folks that are living in Calgary about something. Would there be some backlash if Calgary was in this as a hub city? Would there be?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that I would hear outrage. I'd expect some people even that, like, we mutually follow on Twitter would probably have some kind of something to say about it, because I think people it would encourage people to maybe not be quote unquote following the rules that the rest of us should be following anymore. And I think just all that animosity that exists still with the way that people feel about the Flames ownership group and about the whole arena deal and stuff, I could see those same people kind of being a little jumpy.
I think it'd be a bad look PR wise.
But especially because we're a bit of the Calgary region has been sort of the center point of where a lot of the cases are in Alberta. It's the same reason. Yeah, it's the same reason as why all these media people keep trying to plug Toronto as a potential spot. But I'm like, they're in the middle of southern Ontario and Ontario's got some gigantic numbers in terms of comparatively for at least Canada. Like, is it really? Where is the risk going to be mitigated enough putting it in Toronto, even though they have some of the better facilities? That's my worry.
Yeah,
it's a legit question.
It wouldn't make much sense to have kind of a major hub a part of where teams would play, in my mind. I mean, there's too much risk involved. The only thing that I can really think of for, Western Canada would be, Saskatchewan to be one of those major hubs, or not a major hub, but a place where teams can go play. Other than that, I don't know. I know Edmonton has been talked about, and it is a good potential for as far as big markets go, but at the same time, I'd say there's too much risk going to any Canadian city that has an actual hockey team.
And again, it also comes down to the details of, are they just playing games with the teams within their division, and they're literally just going from hotel to the facility and then back? Or are we still talking travel between hub cities?
Yeah.
So
at least my understanding of that was that basically the first 2 rounds would be in just at hub city. They would only be going from hotel to arena. And then at that point, you'd have to travel to another hub city where those 2 teams meet in that city. And it's not traveling back and forth, but once those 2 teams are in the same city, they just play each other in that one city.
But the issue is the regular season. Because to me, it sounds like the NHL and Gary Bettman are pushing hard to finish off the regular season in some sort of manner.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, and you could see why, right? I mean, the idea of even being able to try and finish the season and have a playoff is already a question of competitive integrity. So I'm sure they would want to find some way to get to an even games played for all the teams before getting into a playoff. So I can understand that. Just that's just another level of logistics and timeline crunch to deal with. I don't know, just to pick up on the comment about where to play games as a hub city. I would think that, pick your smallest NHL markets. In terms of an optics sort of thing, I think it's an easier sell in terms of what is low risk if you're playing in Edmonton or Winnipeg or St. Paul, Minnesota, or whatever, smaller locations than to go to Toronto. I mean, like Southern Ontario is gigantic and they got a public health crisis there just like everywhere else, but you're dealing with more of everything there. So I don't know, like to me optically that's a bit of a challenge, but then again, Scotiabank Arena may be better suited for hosting something like a tournament where you're trying to house multiple teams all at once, more than just 2. So I don't know.
That's the exact sort of, all the pieces of the puzzle need to fit, right? Yeah. You need to have the right facilities. You need to have potentially a practice facility, because you're only 16. Like, they're going to try and play 3 games a day, so you need to have. You're not, even if you have, that's 9 teams. Sorry, that's 6 teams a day. You're not. Every team's not going to play every day, so they're going to want a practice facility. They're going to want training facilities. They're going to need proper medical facilities. You're going to need an arena that can house like really, really hone in and have the right equipment for the ice technicians, because 3 games a day with NHL players playing, that ice doesn't get chewed up.
Yeah.
So you, by that 3rd game, you want to be able to make sure that the ice from at least throughout the day is still somewhat good.
I mean, I'll say this: the Olympic competition usually plays 3 games a day in one rink, and that was done in Vancouver. I know from the experience of working at the arena in those days that in order to house all of the Olympic hockey teams, not only did they take use the 2 normal hockey dressing rooms, there was a couple of basketball dressing rooms there, and then they actually made more dressing rooms. They took a storage room and made a dressing room out of that, and I think they brought in a couple of trailers, and like Sweden and some of the lower ranked teams were actually having to go outside to their dressing room. So they did stuff like that. I think if you're doing a hub city for the first round of the playoffs, like if the Pacific Division playoffs, that would involve 4 teams. So you could, that should be fairly easy to accommodate in one arena. And you got to think about that, sharing dressing rooms. Like if you're only going to use 2 dressing rooms and you got teams coming and going, I mean, that's a huge risk, I think, for COVID, right?
Yeah.
Like, they would have to do it in a place where all the teams have their own dedicated dressing room the entire time.
And I think once you get to the playoffs, it becomes a lot easier. It's just, how do you get there, and do you go directly to playoffs, and then how do you determine who goes there, or are you actually trying to finish off the regular season in some sort of some way, right? So that's the tricky part.
And
I think that.
Oh,
sorry, Kev. Go for it.
I also think the other part that is a challenge here is during the end of the season the Flames were on a road trip that were supposed to go to the Rangers, the Devils, to play some Eastern Conference teams. In my mind, if you're going to do this has to be if you're finishing the regular season anyway, it has to be interdivisional games. There's no way to me that you can safely do a Flames Rangers game or a Leafs Canucks, like the Leafs and Canucks are not playing. But as an example, the East West games, even the interconference games, I don't think that you can play them anymore. I think they have to.
No, and we have precedent for that with lockout shortened seasons where there was no play between the conferences.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to say before Kev made his point, which was pretty much exactly what I was going to say, was that you're going to have that interdivisional play. You're going to have to, the regular season as it stands for the rest of it. You're not going to have that. There's no way that they can logistically do that. So I think that they would have to have another schedule made up, and some teams are going to be playing one or two less games, and some teams are going to be playing two or more games. So I think that'll be definitely be on the forefront of all of this as well.
Here are the cities that are on play other than Edmonton. Arizona, Toronto is. And again, I don't know why, but I sort of see why.
Because Kevin, just because they're.
Yeah, they're Toronto.
It's Toronto we're talking about.
Pittsburgh and Dallas. Now, Pittsburgh is interesting because Pennsylvania is a hot spot, but where Pittsburgh isn't a hot spot. So that's why they're up. Dallas is pretty high up, but it seems like their cases are in packs in Texas. So that's why Dallas is in there as well. I'm trying to imagine ice in Dallas in the summer.
Yeah, to me, something like Minnesota or like a place like that would make more sense than Dallas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's interesting. Do you think that there will be some NHL players that refuse to do this? And the reason I ask is I do believe that there's going to be some Major League Baseball players that are already concerned about how Major League Baseball is going to relaunch. Mike Trout has spoke out. Clayton Kershaw has spoken out. Do you see any NHL players saying, I don't think that this is worth it?
There might be a small handful, but I don't think it's going to be like a major coup, if you will.
I think there might be a couple, but I think one thing is hockey players are more team-based and old school, what's best, they work together as opposed to thinking what's best for them and thinking individually. So if the PA says it's okay and the player committee that's working on getting back to playing says it's okay, I think they'll, even if there are a couple who aren't too comfortable, I think it'll go for it. I don't think we're going to see anyone that will be huge to say no.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if there isn't anybody that speaks out, or I'm sure there'll probably be one or two voices that come out and say some level of concern with it, but shouldn't be anything dramatic.
Jake Virtanen has expressed concern. Drew Doughty expressed concern. It is interesting, but anyway, go ahead.
Again, it all comes down to what it looks like in June.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't think you should. I think if they said, "Oh, we're going to start playing next week," I think there'd be a big coup by the players saying no. Like, but if they're given the details of this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're mitigating all the risks and all that, and I think they're going to look at that and go, well, okay, then I think that should work. Like if they do it right, I think it's going to be tough for the players to say no.
Yeah, the reaction is going to be contingent on like the level of preparation that is done.
Yeah.
Yeah, the NHL won't. Obviously, you have the PA involved as well, but with that combination, it'll be hard for players to say no.
And one more thing, and then we'll move on. Is there a way to do this that the teams that are basically either mathematically, i.e. Detroit, or pretty close to out, is there a reason for them? Would there be a way to say, look, you're not going to be in the playoffs. It may not be risky. Say, we can leave you out because you're not going to. We know you're not in, so it's not worth it for you to take that risk.
I disagree.
Well, for the guys that have like secure spots in the NHL, I think it's easy for them. But if you're somebody that's fighting for a spot next year, and now you're being told forget it, I don't know. That's a difficult one.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky situation. But I feel like, to me, what makes the most sense is you allow the team the option. If you make a decision as a team that no, it's not worth it, then it's up to each individual team as far as like if they wanted to take that risk or not.
It's hard because, what about the teams that are fighting for a playoff spot? What if they have a quote unquote easy schedule with, potentially playing, a Detroit, and that might be a defining factor towards whether or not they get in or not too. Right. And I don't see, I see where you're coming, Chris, but I don't know if I agree entirely with it because, they're going to be the whole entire NHL or it's not, because then there's going to be another asterisk beside it saying that, this team didn't actually come and play.
The asterisk is going to be unavoidable no matter what.
A double asterisk.
Yeah. We may have 5 asterisks by the end of this.
But then, like the point is, like, at what point where do you cut them? Do you make the cutoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because Detroit is absolutely horrible.
Well, they're mathematically out, though.
Well, yeah, they're absolutely horrible. Like they're 23 points below the Senators for 31st in the league. They have 39 points in 71 games. Like, just because Detroit's horrible doesn't mean like. And then you got the rest of them that like they're technically they could go on a 11-game winning streak and potentially make the playoffs. Like,
yeah, that's I just was wondering. I mean, it's just the reason I brought that up is it brings a possibility of less risk was why I thought that. But I could see both sides of that. But
that's the puzzle pieces and the what you're weighing on and all that. So it's really tough because where do you draw the line? Yeah. Do these teams stop playing once they're eliminated, and then you have to rejig the schedule? Like at that point, like it just, and then you've got the draft lottery.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think
the other thing is, there's the draft lottery. The other thing is too is even for the teams that we're pretty safe to say not going to make the playoffs. Even being able to play another 1 or 2 regular season games somewhere somehow is still an opportunity for some revenue for those organizations that are bleeding it right now.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing with that too. Yeah, and I do see that too as well.
Nobody wants to hear about millionaire sports franchise owners bleeding money right now, but that's just a reality that exists. So if you get all the teams playing at least a couple of games here before starting a playoff, then it's something for them to offset the losses right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Just the one thing I want to add at the very end here, though, is that we all just have to remember that there's no perfect or ideal situation. It's just you have to make the best of the situation, but not everyone's going to be perfectly happy about whatever is made.
Yeah, and there's so there's so much other stuff that, like, when we were sort of talking about this yesterday on the lockdown, is there's so many of these decisions are being made on the spot without the benefit of hindsight, and it's easy for us looking 4 days ahead when these people are making decisions that we could have made a better decision. That's probably true, but a lot of these places and a lot of these things that are happening, as Premier Horgan has said, is we're making decisions on the fly, and I think there has to be some grace given to people making these decisions, because I truly believe everyone is making the decisions with the best interest of everyone in mind. And I know that in social media we don't always believe that, but I do believe that. Damn it, I do. I will remain on positive.
That's good. You're Mr. Optimist over there.
Well, to be fair, like you may agree or disagree with how politicians and everyone handles these things, but I'm with Kevin. I truly believe that they've all gone in there trying to make the world, the city, the province, the country a better place. I mean, I have one exception. I think we all know who that is, but Orange.
Right. But
yeah.
But if you like Trudeau, you got Kenny, you've got Horgan. They've all gone into this looking to try and make their provinces, their countries better. So to basically throw them under the bus every time they make a decision that you don't like and saying that it just doesn't work. So yeah, they're all trying to do the best. Let's all give them a little bit of grace in this. This is something we haven't seen before in our lifetime. The last time the world ever saw something like this was it 1919 with the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
So
ironically, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's no political points to be lost or gained for the leadership that's in place right now in our provinces and in our, with Prime Minister Trudeau. So, I think we should reasonably take that they're trying to make the best decisions for everybody. Now, as far as the NHL and franchise owners, I mean, I think that on one level they are trying to do what's right for everybody, but at the same time, they're the ones that oversee a very massive enterprise.
Yeah, it's fair, but I truly also think that a lot of them have come in with the best intentions in mind. I mean, I was critical of Flames ownership or Flames decisions to make in terms of what they did with their staff. They ultimately did do the right thing, but I think looking back, I look at that too and think, I don't think they were trying to necessarily be heartless. It was quite possible they just didn't know how to do it, right? And there may have been some other... I think that one of the things is that I have been learning through this is there are probably more things at play with some things that are going on than we know. And just because it looks one way doesn't mean that it is this way, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on because Commissioner Heidi is saying we need to move on because you can, right, Heidi?
Sure.
Right. And where we're moving on is it was 6 years ago. I'm trying to pull this up and I'm having trouble here, but it was 6 years ago 5 years ago, Game 6 of the playoffs between the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks, and it was Matt Stajan that scored the winning goal. I'm trying to pull up the highlight of that, but I'm not finding it here. I'm finding a lot of Johnny and Buddy stuff. But Matt Stajan scored the winning goal. Sorry, I don't have the actual highlight there it is. Okay, here it is. Matt Stajan to hurt people that the Vancouver fans and the Calgary fans will rejoice.
Alexander up the middle. Sedin and Hansen both missed it. Back the other way. Here's David Jones. Takes the shot. Rebound. Ferland can't bury it. Loose puck. Stajan scores.
Tyler just gave a thumbs down to that, but I know Heidi is cheering and Devin is cheering, and I am cheering as well, as I remember that game very well. The Flames came back and won the that 2015 first-round series over the Canucks in 6 games. I'll start with Heidi. What do you remember about that series?
Well, for that game, I was actually there. So I witnessed that goal with my own eyes in the Saddle Dome. It is the first and only playoff game that I have ever been to. Just a lucky circumstance of somebody that I was friends with that had his parents had season tickets, so had the tickets, and then they couldn't make it to the game. So last minute, give them to him. He knew that I was like a huge Flames fan. Like, he wasn't even that much of a hockey fan, but knew that I was. So we ended up going. Actually, he ended up forgetting the tickets after we had met. So I was actually late going into the game. I think the Flames were down 3-0 when we walked in. So it was a very so like it's funny because like I don't remember so much more about like every other game in that series. I just very much specifically remember that one, but like that was insane. Like walking into that game and everyone's just kind of like upset, and I was mad, and my friend was mad, and all that stuff, and just like slowly seeing them come back, it was great. And obviously I've never heard the Saddle Dome as loud as it was. I will go on the podcast chat Twitter and share the video I have of me being up in the press level.
Oh,
and how loud it is. I'll put that on the podcast chat Twitter, or on the Twitter page, so you guys can listen to it from my phone if you really want to. It's still on my Instagram. But yeah, no, it was great, and that was the year that I was like. I was unemployed that year, so I had just got really bored and started watching a lot more hockey that year. So it was a big deal, and yeah, it was awesome. And yeah, like I literally woke up yesterday morning and was all like, "It's April 25th." I'm like, I was like, it was Game 6 5 years ago today.
Devin?
I think from the Canucks end of it, I mean, for me, it was their only playoff appearance since 2013. So it just seems like this blip. Like, it just wasn't really that significant a series. If the Canucks had prevailed and gone on to the next round and then lost, it'd be probably a different story. It'd be more like, I think, 2007, where, yeah, they won a round. They had a bit of a run, but 6-game series and out, and then not back in the playoffs since. I mean, for me as a Canucks watcher, I mean, it just kind of seems a little insignificant, other than perhaps the fact that it gave Bo Horvat a chance at some playoff experience, which may come in handy later on. But watching that game on TV, the Canucks, yeah, they did go up 3-0, but there was just this unease the whole time. You just never really felt like they were going to hold on to that lead and force a 7th game. I just never got the feeling like that was going to happen. And sure enough, the Flames came back and won.
Yeah. What I remember from that series was just how if you weren't at the game, one of the best places to be was hanging out at the Pig and Duke. That place was, yeah, of course. That place was split 50-50. Like, you'd have tables full of Canucks fans with their token Flames fan friend, and tables full of Flames fans with their token Canucks fan friends. Like, it was a lot of fun, and it was almost as good as being there, because it just the atmosphere was just electric, and it was so much fun. It's just unfortunate that the wrong team won.
While I fully agree with where Tyler's coming from in the sense that it wasn't significant from the Canucks side of things, but because that was 6 months or so after I had moved from Vancouver to Calgary, just the fact that I was able to watch a playoff game in Calgary with my team, I was fully enthused. I never got to go to a game in that series, but I definitely did walk the Red Mile after game 2 when we had won, just to be that asshole. But obviously there was no one on the Red Mile to shit talk me. So
as you're walking around, where are all the fans? Where are they?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, for me it was pretty cool. It was made it that much sweeter that my brother chose the wrong team to cheer for, and we beat him. So that was fun for me for beating him. But yeah, I don't know. As far as the series went, that was Ferland's coming out party. Yes. He hasn't really. I'd say that's been the peak of his career so far. He hasn't really gotten back to that status. So it's kind of unfortunate for him, because I feel like he has so much potential, and he has so much just potential, and he hasn't lived up to it since. I think there's a couple injuries that have been a bit of asterisk beside his name, but it was super cool to see Calgary go on to the next round, but then just to get kind of shit kicked by Anaheim, which was a bit of it was hard to watch, but take the little victories of shitting on Sean. That was fun.
It's good that you mentioned Ferland, because on the other end of that there was Kevin Bieksa, and I, sadly for him, that was kind of, I think, the beginning of the end for him, was the way that playoff series went.
Yeah, for me, that was the actual highlight of the series. Like, the one thing I remember the most is the fact that Ferland, effectively got under Juice's skin, and he was just beaking him the entire series.
Well, that was because it was playoff hockey, and you could take 20-foot, 30-foot runs at defensemen.
Oh, here we go.
And there was also Eddie Lack, and Eddie Lack's, it was Michael Ferland's mom and Eddie Lack's dad that was always the camera would focus on both of them throughout the series.
And don't forget 19-year-old Sam Bennett.
Sam Bennett.
Don't even bring that guy up. Fuck.
I was going to bring it up.
Sam Bennett.
Yeah. Never stopped hearing about that.
You look at that Calgary Flame team, though, and I you know what? Listen, yes, they finished second. They made the playoffs. Kudos to them, but that team was. I'm sorry to say this, and even as a Flames supporter, that team was awful. That team was legitimately a terrible team. They found ways to win. They had to come back a number of times to win. It was more luck than skill. Joe Colburn was on this team. David Jones was on this team. Mason Raymond, not good Mason Raymond, but Mason Raymond was on the team. Josh Juris, Brandon Bollig, Dave Schlemko, Ty Witherspoon, the goaltending, Jonas Hiller and Kari Ramo. It just wasn't that good of a team, but they seemed to find a way to win. Some of the fake Canuck players, of course, Ryan Miller was in goal. We talked about Bieksa, Tanev and Edler were there, Ham Hughes was there, Derek Dorsett, Brandon McMillan scored a goal in that game. Nick Bonino was there; he was a -2. But it wasn't. These were not two of the best teams. This was not the two best teams in the National Hockey League. It was fun, but it also, I think, either way that this would have went, I think both of these teams would have had the crap kicked out of them by Anaheim.
This matchup was really the argument against the current playoff format. I mean, really, the Canucks had home ice advantage in that series. I mean, it really had no business being in that position. If you seeded it the old way, they really, there were stronger teams that should have been, having the home ice advantage to start the playoffs. So it was, I'm happy that the Canucks were in, and it was an interesting playoff series, but that one, that matchup probably shouldn't have happened. I mean, in the Western Conference bracket, I would say they were the two weakest teams facing off against each other.
Yeah. It was that was the year of the find-away Flames, as Kevin was talking about earlier, and it was just third period comebacks and
kids.
Yeah, exactly, the comeback kids, and I don't know, it is a bit of a a weird first round matchup. You could have, I believe it came down to the last game or two, whether or not Calgary would play, I can't remember who, over Vancouver, but at the end we played Vancouver, and that was a way better matchup. I got to take a look back to see exactly what that was, but it kind of has a little bit of an asterisk beside it as well.
Well, if you look at the standings, it was either the Canucks were finished second in the division with 101 points, and the Flames were finished third, and they were basically either in the playoffs playing the Canucks or out, because the both wild card teams were in the Central Division. They were Minnesota with 100 points and Winnipeg with 99. So there was it was it was the Kings that were chasing the Flames, and they had 95 points.
Yeah, and I think the Flames got a big win late in the year of the Kings to make sure that they did get in the playoffs. So
I remember that.
Yeah.
And it eliminated LA, I think, as well.
Yeah, it was like right towards the end of the season, because I think I remember being with like some of my friends, and I think we were at one of the bars in my neighborhood or something watching that game.
Yeah, just pulled up the schedule, and they played the Kings in game 81 and won 3-1. Yeah. And I think that probably that sealed it.
Yeah, they played Winnipeg at 82, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah, they beat. They were. It was both game 81 for both teams, Flames and Kings. So I think what they did is they sealed it because they probably had the division to the series, the season series to clinch it. So.
And who was game 82 for the Flames that season?
Winnipeg. So, but yeah, it was both those teams were not where they were. The Canucks were on the downfall. They had the Sedins weren't the best, and they didn't have any sort of secondary scoring at that point. And then they had. And then the blue line was still a shell of what it was, and the Flames just found a way.
Yeah.
The find a way.
One other thing I wanted to point out was that Matt Stajan had 3 points in that game, and that was a big highlight on his career, because right after that he was not saying he was like a top line player, and not even close. He was mid tier at best. But I remember very, very vividly that was a huge point in his career.
And they lost a child during that year as well, which I'm trying to remember I don't remember the full story, but he dealt with some personal tragedy, which I think for Flame fans it was emotional to see him score that winning goal, considering all that he went through. And you're right, Matt Stajan wasn't a top-tier player under any stretch of circumstances, but he was certainly a valuable piece to the Flames.
Yeah.
And clearly had some extra motivation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing, going back to Tyler's point about it giving us Bo Horvat some playoff experience, he showed quite well in that series. He in the 6 games, he had 1 goal, 3 assists, was dominant in the faceoff circle at 60%. Like he showed that he's a playoff player, and I think that's the one thing I'm really looking forward to if they can get back to this is to see where he's at.
Yep.
And in that series, he was the 4th line center at that point, right?
I think he had bumped. They put him on the 3rd line at that point.
Okay.
Because I think he was playing with Burrows and Dorsett or something like that, or Hansen and Dorsett.
Yeah, that sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah.
Of course, the Flames also had Yuri Hudler which was.
But no, they did. The Canucks didn't have Burrows. He was injured for that series. Right. Yeah. So it was Hansen and Dorsett or something like that. But he had some skill to work with Hansen. So, but yeah, it was that both teams were not at their best, but the Flames were on the up a little bit because that was their only little playoff venture until last year, I think.
And that Hoodler pickup was a trade deadline acquisition, right?
I
thought he'd been there the whole year.
No, okay. I think he was a free agent.
He was a free agent, yeah. Yes, he was, yeah.
Do want to point out the Flames made the playoffs in 2017, were swept that year against Anaheim, but they were in that year as well.
Yeah.
While the Anaheim curse was still active.
Yeah.
2 wins in the last 12 playoff games for the Calgary Flames. Anyway, we'll leave that for another time. It was good to look back on that, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about 2011, but I do think that 2000, I'm not saying that team was awful, but it's a good year to reminisce about anyway. So, thought we chose that over some other things, but it's also. Continuing kind of the redraft theme here. Last week we talked about the Connor McDavid redraft because that was the draft lottery of 5 years ago that Connor McDavid was drafted. The Edmonton Oilers won the lottery and they got Connor McDavid. 2016, the Toronto Maple Leafs won the lottery and they grabbed Austin Matthews. And if we all remember, that was also the year that the Vancouver Canucks drafted Olli Juolevi. Devin, you can laugh now.
So you're laughing at a guy who's been dealing with injuries?
No.
Classy.
Hey. And the Calgary Flames.
You know what? Salty Sean is my favorite, I have to say.
And the Calgary Flames, Heidi, you can cheer, drafted Matthew Tkachuk.
What?
Drafting Matthew Tkachuk.
Yes.
Yay. Oh, okay. Anyway.
Now, she's disappeared. Is she coming back with something Chucky related here, or what is... I feel like something is happening.
I got up to put my cup away.
Okay. We're just getting to the good stuff here.
Yeah.
Yes.
The kitchen's literally 5 feet away. I can hear you.
So, yes, we are going to do our top 5 redo, and I'm going to start by saying this will be my first hot take. There are at most, if I compare the 2015 to the 2016 draft, there are at most 3 that I would consider putting in the 2015 draft from this. I don't know if this goes back. I think I would suggest that the 2015 draft so far has turned out better than the 2016 draft. I'll see if you guys agree or disagree with me. Pardon the pun. But my top 5 is Matthews would be 1. Matthew Tkachuk would be number 2. Patrick Laine would be number 3. I'll give an explanation. I would go number 4 right now would be, so I don't know if a lot of people would have him, but he has to be considered. I would go Carter Hart 4, and I would probably, I debated this, but I'm going to go with Ellis DeBrincat with number 5. I did consider Sergachev, and I did consider Dubois, and I also considered McAvoy. But those would be my 5. The reason Matthews, I think, has turned out to be the best player. I don't think that you can go anywhere other than Matthews. To me, I went Tkachuk over Laine because I feel Tkachuk has been more consistent. Tkachuk drives the play. Tkachuk is a guy that you can play him with anybody, and the players are better with him. Patrick Laine, my issue, I'm not disputing the guy's talent, shot, ability, skate. Probably, maybe, I would argue, yes. In terms of talent, he's better than Tkachuk, but I just haven't seen the consistency from Laine that I would prefer, and that's why I put Tkachuk above Laine. So, you can laugh at me for those picks, but there you go.
Yeah, I think it's Matthews number 1 with a bullet, unfortunately. But after that, I think you can make a case for Matthew Tkachuk for the second best pick in that draft, but I still think it's Patrick Laine. I think his skill and he had one bad season, but this past season he's been fantastic. I just don't think you can. You look at the high end potential of him, the game breaking potential that he has. I just don't think I can look past that. And then number 3 is Matthew Tkachuk. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. He is the 3rd best player in that draft. And then I would go. I think there's a group of 3 that I think you need to mention with 4, 5, and 6, and you can put them in any order. Carter Hart as the best goalie in that draft, and then you've got the 2 top defensemen that came out of that draft in Mikhail Sergachev and Charlie McAvoy, 2 legit number 1 young defensemen that are coming up in this league, and as good as Clayton Keller, Alex DeBrincat are, and even Pierre-Luc Dubois. I just think the 2 defensemen need to be commended for how well they've played.
I think if you're trying to do this based on overall impact, I mean, I don't think we're gonna have any disagreement in this group that it's Matthews 1. Laine as a scoring threat, Winnipeg is not going to complain about making that pick, but I think in terms of overall impact on the game, I put Tkachuk just slightly ahead of Laine. In the actual draft, it was Pierre-Luc Dubois 3rd, Jesse Puljujarvi 4th, Olli Juolevi 5. I mean, it's just amazing, if those teams had a do-over here. Really like the idea of Charlie McAvoy being somewhere in that top 5. I think he's just been a huge impact for the Bruins as well. And then Carter Hart, I don't know. I mean, anytime you're picking a goalie high in the draft, like in the top even 10, I mean, you're really expecting, dominant top of the league type of goaltending. And Carter Hart's a good goalie, but I'm not sure I'd have him in my top 5 quite yet. Clayton Keller and Alex Nylander and Sergachev, they'd all still be for me in that top 10 part of the draft. But Boston getting McAvoy at 14th turned out to be an enormous steal.
I would have to agree with Tyler for most of his top 5, to be fully honest here. Like, for me, I had Matthews, and then Tkachuk, like Tyler said, just barely edging out Laine. And then as far as rounding out the 4 and 5, I would probably say Sergachev and DeBrincat.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to blow you guys away. But
you switched to your Toronto hat, by the way.
He just put the Tor hat on.
He put his Tor hat on.
Weird.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah. So, Matthew's number 1.
Should just give you my flip-flops here. You just...
Yeah. No. Keep those, Juolevi. Thank you. Yeah, Matthews number 1. And you might call me a homer for saying this, but Tkachuk number 2. I just think he's just an overall complete player, including Pest being an overall player. And the amount of assists that he has is he's at 141 for assists, 235 per points, and that's only 12 points back of Laine. Laine is just too inconsistent for my liking. But I do have Laine at 3. And right now I had a hard time going 4-5, but I believe Carter Hart will, I'd pick him number 4, with being so young. And, potentially I know he was, a tandem with Elliott this year in Philadelphia, but I feel like he'll just have a massive career as a number 1 goalie going forward. It's kind of good to see that Philadelphia finally has that potential for a goalie, because they've been rifling through him like crazy. Number 5 was super hard for me. You do have like the Dubois. Or just Dubois, DeBrincat, Sergachev, McAvoy, and the whole debate of, what would you rather have, a number one defenseman or a number one center? And I think that a number one center kind of just barely beats out a defenseman. And I think Dubois is that player. He's I think he's become more of a 200-foot player, and I think being under Tortorella has really helped with his development. But number 6, it probably would be DeBrincat is my kind of rounding. I know we don't going to do top 5, but 6 is definitely, I think, DeBrincat. But I do want to point out some runner-ups of, well, they're not runner-ups, but honorable mentions, and the defense in this draft is the amount of depth that's there. You have Charlie McAvoy, you have Sam Girard, you have Jacob Chychrun, Philip Hronik, Victor Mete, Dennis Cholowski, Max Lavoie. And if you guys don't know who Max Lavoie is, he'll probably be first-line power play player in Ottawa. You have Adam Fox as Calgary fans know, and I love the fact that the first game that he played in the Saddle Dome, everybody booed him when he had the puck. It was beautiful because for those of you who don't know, he actually asked for a trade, and he was actually a part of the trade to Carolina. People call it a throw-in, quote unquote, but it was actually a calculated risk. And I thought that was really good of Tree Living to not to throw him in there, but to put him a part of that trade and to kind of round out that defensive depth in the draft. You have Dante Fabro, which was, part of the, they want to get him into the lineup in Nashville as soon as they can. And another 2 more honorable mentions, or I guess a couple more. Dylan Dubé for Calgary. He's turned out to be an amazing player, and I think he has so much upside watching him play every single night. You have Clayton Keller, part of that as well, and he's lighting it up in Arizona. Tyson Jost in Colorado. He's a great solid depth piece. Jesper Bratt, who actually probably would be in the top 15 as of right now, I think. He got taken 162nd overall. And, one more honorable mention is Riley Stillman, who is Corey Stillman's son. Completely different player from his dad, but he's I saw him a couple times playing up in Florida. So the amount of depth that's actually there for defensemen, I think, is very apparent throughout this draft.
Just off of what Devin said, though, actually 2 underrated players. That one that he mentioned was Jesper Bratt, but the other one that I also want to mention is Samuel Girard.
Yeah. I still feel with this draft, there's some players right now that have just not quite hit their peak yet. Like a Jacob Chychrun, I still think there's some good things coming for him. As an example, I think if we did this at 5 years from now, I think the top 3 may stay the same, but I would not be surprised if some of these names that we didn't mention jumped into a 4 or 5.
Yeah, the top 10 definitely has a lot, like 3 to 10 has a lot of room for switching around for sure.
Yeah. For the Flames, the one person I do want to mention that I am still excited about, and I think he's going to do some really good things, is Matthew Phillips. I'm excited about him. Every time I've seen him, he seems to be fitting the mold, and I think it won't be next year, but in a couple of years, they're going to have to find a way to get him into that lineup. That's, to me, I'm like one of those players I'm really excited from a Flames perspective to see going forward. Like, I don't know if Devin or Heidi agree, but I'm excited about Matthew Phillips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
Sorry, go for it, Heidi.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, for sure. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing Phillips up here as well.
Yeah, I've heard is good things about him. I know that Ryan Pinder on the Fan 960 talks to the head coach of the Flames affiliate team, and Thank you. I was gonna say Adirondack Flames, but I knew that was completely wrong.
You're about like 5 years too late on that one.
Yeah, just a little bit. And he has high hopes for Phillips for sure. So yeah, I'm with you, Kev.
And this was also the draft that the Canucks drafted William Lockwood.
Yes,
and he's turning pro this next upcoming year, so it'll be interesting to see where he goes. I think there's some people who think he's got some Yannick Hansen style in his game. So
yeah, it's an interesting draft. It was also the draft of Jonathan Dahlin, was drafted by Ottawa. Of course, was traded to Vancouver in the Alex Burrows trade. Tyler Parsons was drafted. Yeah, it's
going to be. I think it's going to be a good solid AHLer, if not definitely a backup within this league.
Yeah. We also.
Kev, I thought you might want to know what I.
I didn't ask you because you said you don't You don't know enough, so I didn't know if you participate.
This one I know a lot. Thank you very much, Devin.
Oh gosh.
I thought for sure you wanted to know how I felt about whether Matthew should have been picked first or not.
Okay, yeah, I apologize profusely, Heidi. I deserve a punch in the face. You think we're in physical distancing?
Anyways, maybe this will come as a shock to you, but I actually am perfectly fine with the fact that the Toronto Maple Leafs took Austin Matthews. I think it'd be silly not to be honest. But as for that number 2 spot, I'm kind of just echoing what everybody else has said. I think that Matthew Tkachuk's had a little bit more impact on the game and just for his team and I forgot which one of you guys said about Patrick Laine being inconsistent. That for sure, but I still see him being in that number 3 spot for sure. And then other players that I kind of that jump out to me, not necessarily in any rank, but that I kind of like Clayton Keller, Charlie McAvoy for sure. I got Charlie McAvoy in a pool team a couple years ago, and that's when I noticed how much points he was racking up in my pool. So I kind of started paying a little bit more attention to him. We'll definitely echo what Devin said about getting Dylan Dubé in that draft too. So just in case you guys wanted to know what my thoughts were.
I am sorry, Heidi. Oh, I am an idiot, aren't I? At least you laugh. It's an interesting draft. To me, for comparison, I don't know if you guys agree, but I would say Matthews, Tkachuk, and Laine would be in consideration for the 2015 top 5. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but
in what way? As
what would you
just top end talent?
Yeah, if they were there would be the only 3 I would say I would put when we did the 2015 that I would think would have a chance.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And just, as we said, I think as you said, it's a little bit early for this draft, but if you look in 3-4 years from now, I do think if you look at how Patrick Laine played this year, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a number 2 with a bullet again. I just watched him play this year, and watching him play this year, he seemed to understand what he did wrong last season, and he's corrected it. He had more assists than goals this year. So I just think that give it another 2-3 years, and I wouldn't be surprised. And that's not a knock against Matthew Tkachuk. No. That's just the high end skill that Patrick Laine has, and the one shot goal potential that Patrick Laine has is not something you can teach.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally I think Laine is more talented than Tkachuk. I would totally agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess it would just be the drive that would I guess the Don Cherry's coming out in me, the European in him I just see more drive and determination with Tkachuk than Laine, but it does show that he's willing to learn and willing to become more of a 200-foot player, and I think that's one thing that he has focused on this year for sure.
The one thing, before we go into the next topic, that I do think that always counteracts the Cherry part to me, that when I think about that, is I do think smarts often outweigh talent. And I know that a lot of European players, they don't start off well. Like the Sedins is an example. They weren't great off the start, but they became who they are. Ovechkin, another one. I think understanding the intelligence of the game does go a long way. That always has been the counter argument to what Cherry has said.
Yeah.
It's because it's not always been like, it's a different way to look at, like, I can't sit here and no one can sit here and tell me that Daniel and Henrik Sedin were not tough players. Just because they didn't throw a fist doesn't mean they weren't tough.
Yeah. We could talk 2 hours on that there, Kev. Yeah. So
I just wanted to bring that up.
We'll get us down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. We'll quickly do the Mount Rushmore. But is there another draft that we want to look at? Are we interested in continuing this?
I'd say
I would go backwards. I wouldn't go any more sooner.
Yeah,
it's just too early.
Yeah, I'd say start with 14 and work our way back slowly, and kind of see how it all develops.
Okay.
Yeah, into that.
Okay. We started this quickly, and we will talk more about this with Gordie Howe. But Sean brought up this idea last week of the Mount Rushmore, and your Mount Rushmore, and you believe everyone's Mount Rushmore should be what, Sean?
It should be Gordie Howe, Bobby Orr, Mario Lemieux, and Wayne Gretzky.
Okay. So here's my thought on this. Can we add people to the Mount Rushmore without subtracting people?
No, because it's 4 heads.
No, you can't do
that. Kevin, there is a limit. We can't
but
pick a table, Kevin.
No, and hear me out. If we believe that Alexander Ovechkin, as an example, is one of the best goal scorers to ever play in this game, how do you not put him on a Mount Rushmore?
Well, again, it's four heads.
It's not Mount Rushmore. Then it's just a top 5.
I think you need a different. You can only have 4. Yeah.
You can only have 4.
Different analogy, Kevin.
There you go.
4 is the limit of Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, and I just don't think there's anybody that you can really say that should be on the Mount Rushmore more than the 4 that Sean mentioned.
Yeah, they are my 4. It's just Crosby and Ovechkin are in my top 10 of all time, though, that's the tough part. And does that change? I guess if Ovechkin breaks Gretzky's record, what happens?
I don't think he cracks it. I think the other guys just have more. They have more to themselves, and nothing against Ovechkin, and the fact that he's kind of come into his own as of late. Later in his career, then I don't know. To me, he's always just he probably will be the best pure goal scorer of all time. Period. Mm-hmm. But as far as Mount Rushmore or cracking the top 5, I don't think he comes close to everybody else.
That's fair.
Like for me, he would be maybe my top honorable mention, but to try and put him on the Mount Rushmore, no.
Yeah.
And to continue on with this, there, Kevin, you said that you feel that Mario Lemieux is the most talented player to ever play the game.
Yes, I do.
I'm gonna disagree with you right there, and it's Bobby Orr.
Oh, I would get Kevin to say his piece first on why he thinks that, and then you can go in, Sean.
All right, Kev.
Bobby Orr is the second most talented player to ever play the game, but Mario Lemieux was. When Mario Lemieux wanted to play, he was unstoppable. Like, literally, Like, you could not contain him defensively. He had the physical abilities to do whatever the hell he wanted to do. And yes, Bobby Orr had the same thing, and it's, I'm not saying that Orr was not talented. It's just, I just felt that Mario Lemieux, I think Mario Lemieux, if he played now, I think that there would have been a reasonable shot he breaks Gretzky's record. I just think that with the rules now, he's just was unstoppable when he wanted to play. He didn't always do it, though. There were times that he waited until the final last half of the third period to turn it on, and he became Mario, but he didn't always do that. I'm not going to say that Bobby Orr was not talented, but I just look at what Mario Lemieux was, what he did to defensemen. I know you're going to counter what Bobby Orr did to defensemen, but it was just... I just think he was unstoppable. When he wanted to go, he was unstoppable. I will say, though, because I thought you were going to say Gretzky was a smarter player than Mario Lemieux. But I think in terms of talent, I would say Mario was more talented than Gretzky.
Yeah, I again, it's nothing against Lemieux. I just think that Bobby Orr, just his skating alone, no one could touch his skating in that era, and no one could touch the way he thought the game in that era, and no one could touch it the way he puts, the way he handled the puck in that era. Because you can't really go based off of who was the most talented, because the game changes era to era to era. And I would say that if you're going to go based off of pure talent, you could make an argument that there'd be a handful of players who are more talented than a lot of the greats in the past. But in terms of what their impact on the game, I just don't think there was anyone who had a bigger impact on the game than in terms of how every time he touched the puck. Every time he touched the puck and started rushing up the ice, you knew something special was going to happen with Bobby Orr. And we lost him in after a little bit with his knees too, right?
Yeah,
and he was still sad, but very, very good. So it's I just, from the back end, being someone who can control the play from the back end for all three zones, I just don't think there's anyone that is at Bobby Orr's level.
He's up there. I'm not disputing that. Devin, what were you going to say?
No, that's I disagree with both of you. I think Gordie Howe is the best player of all time.
Was he the most talented, though?
Pardon?
Did he have the most natural talent to play the game, though?
God, no. It doesn't. To me, it's it's a mix between God-given talent and the drive and determination of saying, you know what, no, you're not going to do this to me. I'm going to elbow you right in the face.
Yeah. I still think if Gordie was alive, he'd probably still be elbowing people in the face now.
Oh, totally. He had a hell of a career, playing decades upon decades. I believe he played 5 decades of hockey and got to play with his sons, which is amazing. And there's so many accolades and so much respect from you're talking about a guy who played in all different types of hockey. Granted, it didn't change as much as it did between the 80s to now, but it definitely did change throughout his career, and he adapted. And I wouldn't say he adapted; he just dominated.
One thing I'll say with Gordie Howe is I think he's the most well-rounded player out of that four.
That's fair.
He could do it all. He could outskill you. He could out-brawn you. He could punch you in the face or just deke you out of your pants. He could do both.
Yeah, agreed. And I believe he was the only player to ever play in 5 different decades.
And play with his sons.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. He started his career in 1946 in the NHL, played for Detroit. And his last year was, in the NHL at least, was 1979 and 1980 with the Hartford Whalers, and that's where he played with the Suns. He did go play in the IHL with the Detroit Vipers, but that was only one game, so and he didn't do much there. But it's actually kind of cool that his last All-Star game was Wayne Gretzky's first All-Star game, which is a very, very cool moment of if you haven't seen it, search it up on YouTube, of them lining up, Gretzky and Gordie Howe right beside each other. It's a very cool moment.
Yeah, for sure. Tyler, Heidi, did you have anything to add?
Not much other than, with Mario Lemieux, the thing for me is just what he could do as a guy that big, the smoothness of a man that big out there, and just making the opposition look silly when he was on at the top of his game is what stands out for me. But yeah, hard for me to argue against Orr and Howe in terms of overall skill set and impact on the game.
Heidi?
I don't have much to add or really anything to add. I just want to point out again, Kevin, that you cannot pick 5 people. It has to be 4, and I do not dispute the 4 that were mentioned.
I want to pick all the tables.
Yeah.
Fine. I pick all the tables. That's my rule. So all right. Did I leave anything out? No. I answered my own question. How do we follow everyone?
I am Beardy Canuck 03 on Twitter.
I am at Heidi Mazeballs on Twitter and everywhere else on the internet.
I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
I'm at Schneise on most social media.
I am GordHow09 on Instagram, not Instagram, on Twitter.
And I am KEVOLE on social media. And I am going to commit, Tyler, to doing a TikTok this week. So, and I'm not dancing, but
now, okay, why? So you're now going to rope me into TikTok now because I'll be the last man resisting the TikTok.
Pretty much, yeah. But I'm doing a TikTok this week. I'm telling you now.
Kevin, if you ever come up here, I'm going to lock you outside.
I deserve it. On that note,
Kevin deserves it anyways.
On that note, thanks again to Zach.
Backstory that most of our listeners probably don't know of.
Yes.
I feel.
That'll for story time another time.
Yes.
All right. Talk to you all soon. Bye for now.